Okay, I think it would be remiss of me not to say something about yesterday's huge People's March in the capital. Um, the figure of 1 million people is has been passed around a lot. Now, I would put a little caution there simply because it is the tendency of organisers of any political march, social march, to use an upper estimate for figures. But I think by any angle, that was a huge demonstration. So let's say somewhere between 700,000 and 1 million people. That makes it the biggest demo of any kind in this country in the 2010s, and it makes it the biggest demo of any kind since at least the February the 15th, 2003 anti-war protest against the Iraq War and Blair administration back in 2003. Um, so, whatever way you look at it, it was a huge demonstration. That takes a lot of organization, and that's going concurrently with this petition for a people's vote, which has, as I understand it, 4 million plus signatures now. There is some allegations that there are international signatures there. It's possible. But as I understand it, on government petitions, you have to put your postcode and so on. So I'm not sure how easy it would be to hack into that sort of petition. It's easy to fake petitions, but with I know because I've signed it a number of times, I've signed various petitions on the government website, you have to put your postcode. So I think it's more likely that there are that many people who are this disillusioned. I mean, it's the largest number of people ever on a petition on that website ever. That's a huge number of people. Um, okay, so I think one thing everyone can agree on is the general sense of uncertainty. And I've never seen such an embattled prime minister, even at the peak of the Great Recession, when Gordon Brown, the pressure was really piling on Gordon Brown, and the expenses for honours, all that sort of thing was going on. Brown was under huge pressure. He was not a particularly popular prime minister at that point. I don't think even he, I'm thinking of recent memory, has been under such sustained calls to quit as Theresa May has been. Both Blair and Thatcher were very controversial figures, um, but they were strong prime ministers. They just had this ability to keep rebounding back. One thing you could say for Theresa May is she's tough. I don't think anyone could dispute that. Some would say tough slash stubborn. I mean, to go through what she's going through, you have to be. It's just can't imagine the constant negotiation she's going through. Then knowing that your party is constantly stabbing you in the back, and then I do sympathise with her on some level. On the other hand, I don't think her help matters when she tried to turn populist anger against Parliament. That will do her no favours in terms of getting support in her party. But I think that is, to a significant portion, what Brexit is about. I do think it's something of a Tory civil war. Europe, the EU, has always been an issue within the Tory party. It's always been that issue that has, a bit like Labour and the centre left versus the left, like the militant faction, the Momentum faction today, the Corbynites versus the Blairites, all that thing within Labour. The Tory equivalent is Eurosceptics versus pro-Europeans. That's their internal thing, and this has really been manifested in. We have a situation now where both major parties are in absolute civil war. Sometimes we have a situation where one of them is, but to have both of them in that situation at once, with two leaders who are controversial, I it's been a long time since. I mean, I suppose the nearest comparison would be Michael Foot and Margaret Thatcher, except that Thatcher was widely supported within her own party. Theresa May can't say the same thing. So this is a unique situation. Then we have new parties emerging. There's a Brexit party. There's whichever party comes out of the independent group. Um, but about the this march, I'm still wary of a second referendum. The reason being, I mean, I don't think it will divide the country more. That was the thing I was saying, oh, it will divide the country. No, I've changed my mind on that. I don't think it will divide the country. I think the country's about as divided as it can get, short of dare I say it, civil war, which I don't think will happen. But I think the country is as divided as it can get. So I don't think another referendum would cause any more division. I think it would just clarify what the divisions are. However, the reason I'm wary of it is if we go ahead with another referendum on the European Union issue, in whatever format that takes, then the Scottish nationalists will then argue, oh, well, we've had another referendum on the EU, let's have another referendum on Scottish independence. And that could pave the way for an independent Scotland. And then the United Kingdom is done. The country's gone. And that to me would be the absolute worst outcome of Brexit, other than major economic collapse or social collapse. The possibility of the country collapsing itself, that just, I find that utterly unfathomable. And what really bothers me about extreme Brexiteers is their utter lack of anything other than their tunnel vision. Their worldview is EU bad, out of the EU good. We don't care how it happens, we want out. We don't care what the consequences are. That's basically their dogma, and it's causing a hell of a lot of harm, in my opinion. I'm not necessarily talking, yeah, well, I'm not talking about leave people, but here's the thing. I think both sides can be, we talk about leavers and remainers. Those terms are really null and void. I'm in a political forum and I'm on the verge of leaving it because there's constantly Brexiteers coming out and saying remainers are this, remainers are that. Okay, occasionally you get it the other way as well, but that is a Brexiteer dominated group, and every other post is like just smarmy comments about remainers, just sweeping insults, just nonsense, really. I mean, Brexiteers don't like it when you say the Little Englanders, so what gives them a right to dismiss Remainers as one and the same? I've been seeing a lot of that, and I'm tired of it. But I think both sides can be divided into several schools of thought. So, on the Remain side, well, let's start with the Leave side because they were the majority in the referendum. So, there are, I believe, a minority of what I would call hard leavers, people who want out immediately, and they don't really care about the consequences. What the only thing they care about is getting out of the EU. And you can consider hard a derogatory term, but it's hard because it's no compromise. Just get out. That's it. So I think it's an appropriate adjective. Um, then you get these people who are now wavering and they think, has it all been worth it? And they're reflecting that we were fed lies about the NHS, about a range of other things by Farage and co. And they're disillusioned. Then you get leave people who want a no deal, which I personally think would be a disaster, but they want a no deal just to end the impasse, and that's understandable. I do understand where they're coming from. I don't think it's the right approach, but I understand where they're coming from. Um, and then there's those who are soft Brexiteers, and some would say this isn't Brexit, but they want out of the European Union, but they want some of the connections that we have with the European Union. And the hard Brexiteers say that's a fake Brexit. Maybe they're right, because I suppose Brexit means leaving the EU fully. But I think, what bugs me is when hard leavers, they keep coming back to, oh, the Remainers aren't Democrats. But they're kidding themselves if they think 17.4 million people all think alike. I mean, the Leave side's just as divided as the Remain side. So when I keep hearing this, oh, they need to respect the result. The point is, no one knows exactly what 17.4 million people want. Yes, they voted to leave the European Union, but now the divisions within the Leave side are becoming obvious. So no hard leaver can claim that they represent 17.4 million people. It just can't. Likewise, no Remain person can claim they represent that every single person who voted Remain, for example, wants a people's vote or wants another referendum. So on the Remain side, you have those who are Europhiles, and I actually believe they're a minority, predominantly young people, predominantly living in the capital, and they're a little bit dewy-eyed. They don't see the EU's faults, and they think it's kind of this utopia of all nations working together. It's all great, and they do overlook the EU's many problems. I'm not one such person. I'm not a Europhile. I consider myself culturally European. I believe Britain is a European country because of our history. But as for the EU, I have no love for the EU. I think it is out of touch. I think it's bureaucratic, and I think it is largely responsible for a lot of the situation that we're in. Although I certainly wouldn't blame the EU alone. I think Brexiteers need to start taking some responsibility. But there is different schools of thought within the Remain side as well, like I say. So there are those who are, real Europhiles who believe the EU is wonderful and we should stay in. There are those of us, and I probably fit into this category, who don't particularly love the EU but see it as the better option. I'm well aware that there are federalists within the European Union. I'm well aware that there are people pushing for a United States of Europe. But I believe that too many Europeans would reject that. I don't think it will ever happen. Farage and co say, oh, that's the way it's going, but I just don't think that I mean, the comparisons with the Soviet Union, when Jeremy Hunt compared it to the Soviet Union, there's a big difference. The European Union is not keeping people behind barbed wire and machine guns. The European Union is not sending people to gulags for disagreeing with it. So I think those sort of comparisons, people may hate the EU, but they need to be very careful about making those sort of comparisons. And it's also significant that, if it's really like the Soviet Union, then why did so many of the new countries, why were they so enthusiastic to join up? Former Warsaw Pact countries, why were they so enthusiastic to join up if it had echoes of the Soviet Union? Um, so I don't think anyone really knows what the next step is. I mean, one thing I do like about a people's votes is if it presented some clear questions about what the public want. I don't know how leaders can really complain about that. I mean, can anyone honestly say that we have clarity in this situation? Surely a people's vote would simply be giving clarity about what the British public want. So leavers love to talk, I should say hard leavers love to talk about, oh, the British people want this 17.4 million people, and they keep harping back to that. But the all this referendum is showing is how divided not only the country is, but how both sides are in themselves. So my question for her leave is, what exactly do 17.4 million people want out of the EU? Okay, on what sort of premise? Out of the EU with no deal? Out of the EU on a Canada model, a Norway model? What does 17.4 million people want? It's all very well doing two fingers for the EU and saying, oh, we need out now, they're the enemy. But Brexiteers have no plan. It's this great unknown, and they don't seem to understand why people are anxious about that. So, the way I see it is hard levers are pushing us towards the side of a cliff. That's my gut feeling, and I hope I'm wrong. I really do. Do I think that staying in the EU would be problem free? Certainly not. I'm not even sure we should stay in. Probably the best outcome, and it would, it would have its critics, but we leave the EU, but we keep some sort of compromise situations. Now, the hard levers will say, oh, that's not Brexit. We're still in the EU in name or in everything but name. No, I don't think so. Would leave the EU, would leave those institutions. But then, of course, that leads to another problem because if it's a halfway house, then we've left the EU, but we're still actually subject to EU law. And I suppose that would galvanise the argument for a clean break or a hard Brexit, depending what way you look at it. So I just don't know. And I consider myself pretty politically astute. I could talk for ages about things going on around the world, but when it comes to Brexit, I am totally, like a lot of people, I just don't know. And people love to bash politicians, but politicians divided. And I think there's a lot of decent people in politics who genuinely think this is the best way, but because the political parties are so divided, nothing's getting done. The Prime Minister's totally embattled. I heard last night rumours, well, the Times was reporting that there was an emergency, not a cabinet meeting, but cabinet plotting to actually install David Lidington as an interim leader. Now, if that idea was seriously proposed, an interim leader, that's never happened in British history, as far as I know, going back to Robert Walpole. It's never happened. We've had, I wouldn't say smooth transitions as such, they're a little bit rushed, but we've never had a transition period between prime ministers. It's literally been one prime minister to the next, to the next, to the next, 54 times, with some of the Victorian prime ministers, interlapping and serving several terms of office at different times. But Gladstone did 4 times on 4 different occasions. But we've never had an interim prime minister, and that would be. I don't think Britain could do that. I think that's better for smaller countries. But a big country like Britain, politically big country, needs stable leadership. Now, May is a very embattled and frankly weak leader right now. So I don't think that a new prime minister would face any less pressure than May is. I think he, and it probably will be a he, will face just as much pressure. And I think as soon as they start whatever approach they take, they'll find themselves subject to plots. That's unfortunate in the current environment we're in. I don't understand what the Tories are thinking. Why they. I can understand if they want to privately reprimand May, but what is the point of constantly publicly attacking your leader? That just makes no sense to me. Why does a political party do that? It's like they want to weaken themselves at the polls. I mean, my goodness, May's controversial enough as it is without her own party stabbing her in the back. I don't understand why parties do that. So the way I see it is privately reprimand her, privately or resign. But if you are a Conservative MP, why would you publicly try to weaken your leader? It just doesn't make sense to me. If you really don't like the direction she's taken, then either resign, join that independent group, or call a leadership challenge. Say that you're standing against her. Of course, Heseltine triggered that when Margaret Thatcher lost. They always say the one that wields a dagger doesn't win. So it would be a plucky move for a Tory MP to do that. I'm not mitigating that, but right now the uncertainty cannot be good for this country. I'll say this: we need something certain to happen. I think nothing's going to happen on the 29th. I think that's now null and void, and that is just going to damage May's credibility beyond belief, as if it wasn't already badly damaged, because, it was always, we are leaving on that date. So understandably, the Brexiteers will say, oh, she can't be trusted. But to blame the Remain side for this impasse, it is beyond absurd. It's utterly beyond absurd. It isn't the Remain side that wanted this situation. If the Remain side won, we wouldn't be facing any of this. That's a fact. So people's vote, I'm not dead set against it. And the only thing I'm wary of is that it would galvanise Scottish nationals. But I could be one around, and I may well sign that petition, because maybe a people's vote will finally give a clarity on this situation, give an indication of what people really want in this country, make it a clear question. And yeah, if that means multiple options, then so be it. And then whichever option has the biggest mandate, Parliament goes with that. That seems probably the best option right now.